thank you very much indeed, Oliver, for the lucidity with which you've opened up that whole area of discussion for us, and for the way in which you've shown how important it is as well. So thank you very much for that. I might, if I could, use my prerogative of asking the first question, and then I'll open up the floor to anyone else who's got any further questions or points for discussion after that. I'd like to take you back, if I could, to the idea of the transformative power of presupposing and affirming equality. And you talked on a number of points about self-transformation in relation to that. And my question really is must it be a self-transformation? And the reason that I'm asking it is that I'm thinking that there are these two groups. There's those who have a stake already, and there's the sans peur. But I'm wondering to what extent actually there's a third unnamed group somewhere in the mix. So there's those who have a share, those who have no share, and those who are not even mentioned. And those who are not mentioned, the way I'm thinking about it at the moment, is those who are unable to constitute themselves as a political subject, who are unable to transform themselves or to claim, to stake a claim for a share. And I'm particularly thinking, for example, of those with various disabilities that may impede them mentally, or say that the very elderly in homes who may be the very people who are not treated equal in a particular society. And I'm just wondering, is that on Rancière's radar, and how might those sort of groups who are unable to constitute themselves be thought about in terms of the sort of ideas that you've been laying out?
Yeah, I suppose in the framework provided by Le Maître Ignorant, one does clearly have somebody else who is creating a space in which a space of equality, in which another can realise their potential. And I suppose if one were to apply that sort of scheme to the kinds of groups that you're talking about, the kind of people that you're talking about, then that might allow for some kind of egalitarian concern for the other. And perhaps indeed this is the point of what I call heterologic disidentification as a condition of subjectivation. Perhaps that is what Rancière is trying to get at with that kind of idea, and perhaps that is an account of solidarity. In La Mésentente, it's the emphasis really is much more on groups self-transforming, and I wouldn't say that he is particularly concerned with, say, those who don't have the cognitive capacity to present themselves politically, if you like, to constitute themselves politically. But I'd also say that his account doesn't exclude them by any means. So it's not directly concerned with them.
Great. Thank you very much indeed. Questions there?
Yeah, I have a question. Let's see if I can actually enunciate it. I am somewhat interested in regards to this heterological disidentification. But you prefaced there's two prefaces. You prefaced first your talk concerning the Aristotelian conception of a category of the subhuman, which therefore then presupposes a category of the human. And this conception of the distributive idea of a tort, that the call for declarative equality must then be preceded by a perceived wrong. That they're declaring their equality because of some sense of inequality. But my question, I suppose, is how much does this involve some idea of the human, if that's the way you're going to put it? And what is this category of the human that is then defining equality? And what's the relationship of that to heterological disidentification, which either places the subject in a position of recognition by others, or a lack of recognition by others, a lack of interpolation into a particular ideological regime, which would allow them to identify precisely with others, or some kind of, plane of eminence that the human would be. Did that make any sense?
It did, yeah.
Okay.
It did. If I may, I'm not going to say. I don't want to say much more about heterologic disidentification, which I think actually I think I kind of confected from the various references in the book to this impossible identification. But I mean, I can answer the first part.
Yeah, that was great.
Try and answer the first part of the question. But I mean, in La Mise en Tente, Rancière talks about Aristotle's definition of the human as the political animal, political because he, as it is he, has the logos, and so has the capacity to use language, to use arguments. And what Rancière says is that all of the interesting stuff happens, if you like, before that. So in situations of inequality. The language that's produced by those who are the sans-part, the excluded, isn't heard as meaning-bearing language. It's heard in a I want to say literal sense, but it can't be quite a literal sense, but in an almost literal sense as animal noises. Mm-hmm. He uses the noises and groaning and all of this. So there is one can't deduce, the fact one can't deduce as Aristotle does anything about what Rancière wants to do anyway is to say that the interesting stuff happens before one comes to label certain people as human and others. So in other words, that where one stands in a society, if one is a sans-part, if one is the sans-part, then one isn't heard as human at all. Do you want to ask the second part of the question again? Or
no, it's okay.
Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but it's just that the question then becomes, the minute that you're defining this human, the question is what, you're defining it then as this use of the logos, this use of speech particularly, and a way in which to self-enunciate, I suppose.
Yeah.
But that use of human in regards to equality, I think in terms of presupposing a wrong against which one must enunciate oneself, I think is what's interesting in this idea that one doesn't then identify with groups. So then at what point is there some kind of human that is in a way urged towards? Where is this kind of this level playing field, as it were? Where is the exemption that is this equality if there is no identification, if it's always in a process of combative reform, basically?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to say there's no room for solidarity at all, and certainly certainly from the examples that Rancière chooses, and there is an emphasis laid on the collective subject rather than the insular, self-regarding subject. Yes, I think that's probably all I can.
Okay.